Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to my live stream. If you're new here, my name is Atypical Security Guard. I run a security guard training and education channel as well as a personal self-protection channel. Today, I want to talk about recognizing danger as a private security guard. But this is something that can be utilized in any realm of self-protection and following your gut. And actually, this story starts with a situation of a mother and a daughter. I listened to a podcast yesterday where this lady was talking about being in a nature preserve or a park or something like that in California. She's walking her daughter around, daughter's maybe 5 or 6 years old, and they pass a guy. So as they're walking through this park, they pass this random guy. He, says hello, kind of nods his head at him. And the lady's she didn't think anything of it. She was like, yeah, it's a regular looking guy. He's listening to music on his phone, walks past us, nods his head, says hello. Well, about a quarter of, we'll just say a quarter of a mile, right? They come across this guy again. He's walking literally the same direction past them. And the lady says, it dawns on her that, it's not necessarily crazy or weird that he's walking the same direction he had passed them before. She's like, maybe he cut across somewhere, maybe he's doing laps or something. But she got this initial feeling that it was a little weird. And then she says she gets a quarter of a mile, right? I don't know what that is. And the guy is now walking the same direction as them, and he kind of zigzags past them so that he has to walk in front of them. And he brushes up against the little girl, and now he turns and starts this conversation about how pretty the girl is, asking questions about the mom. And he seems normal to a small degree. But this entire interaction, now that she's seen him 3 times, and now that he's made this contact with them, something's off, right? And she's like, I immediately start thinking to myself, we have got to get back to the car. We've got to start thinking about how we're going to get out of this situation. There's something that's not right here. So, she has whatever conversation with this guy, kind of appease him to get him to kind of back off, right? She doesn't do anything to really alert the guy that she's worried or scared. But as soon as she can, at the first sign, she starts going back to her car. Well, as she's going back to her car, now she's noticing that this guy and another guy are following, not super close behind them, but close enough that there's a decent chance that if they were to make any sort of attempt to try and grab them or come after them, that they probably could, right? So the lady gets on the phone with her husband. She's explaining to her husband what's going on. He's like, hey, look, I'm going to drive that direction. We'll try and meet you in the middle. Go to this restaurant. Don't drive home. He knows not to have her drive home so that these people can potentially follow her home. So he tells her which restaurant to drive to. She gets in the car. These guys don't follow after her, but as she gets to this restaurant, she notices that the guys are pulling into the restaurant. Husband drives in. This is a true story, right? Husband drives in. They see that the husband is there when he gets out of the car, and they dip out. So there's this long, convoluted story after that of where they stay at the restaurant for a little bit. They call the police. The police get some information on the people. And then when they go to the house later that night, clearly they're all worried and concerned, but nothing came of it. The conversation on the podcast was that when you have these moments where you go with your gut feeling, you feel like something is a potential danger. You feel like something is wrong. And we've all had it, right? You've had times where, I don't know, maybe your friends are like, hey man, let's go out when you're in high school. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. And you don't do it. There's just some weird feeling. I'll never forget when I was a kid. I grew up in Arkansas, and my dad, he would always show me places that were developed, and they were underdeveloped, or they were rural when he was younger. So I grew up in Arkansas in a rural area. My dad was born in 1950. So think about me in the 80s and 90s. I'm going to and being around areas that when my dad was a kid in the 50s and 60s, it was all just like open fields, right? So I'll never forget being a kid and my dad was showing me this lake area that had a bridge on it. And my dad says when I was 13 years old, they were just building that bridge. He goes, they hadn't flooded that area out yet, and they were building a bridge and they were building the lake. And so he goes, there was one point where there was a small amount of water and they had like the scaffolding up for the bridge. And all of his friends were like, hey, let's go jump off of that into that water. And the water was maybe like 12, 15 feet deep. So he said that they all go up there and they're like jumping off of the scaffolding into the water. They're having a great time. It's like the early 60s. And then he says like somewhere down the road within like the next couple of weeks, they had drained that 15 feet of water or so. And you could see that there was rebar sticking up out of the ground that was going to be like utilized for the actual top of the bridge. And he said that every time, and this is like 30 years later, every time that he drove by that bridge, he had this feeling of like death. And he thought to himself, he goes, every time that I look at that bridge, I do the math. And I think we were jumping from there, we were jumping into the water, we were going down this far, we were probably 5 feet from impaling ourselves on that rebar. And he goes, every single time, even as an older man, when he drives by that bridge, he thinks to himself, if we just would have gone down a little bit further, it could have killed us, right? And so we all have this like sixth sense where you do something and you think to yourself, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't go there, I shouldn't put myself in a situation. You got that feeling, right? And that lady had that feeling in that brief moment that there was something off about these guys. And the reason why I tell you this is that I cannot explain to you how many times working in private security that I get that feeling. I probably see 500 to 1,000 people a day. On a 16-hour shift, I probably see 500 to 1,000 people day after day after day, customer after customer after customer. And if you've ever worked in retail, if you've ever worked as a security guard, if you've ever worked in any sort of business where you're dealing with the general public, you know that there's a feeling that you get that's normal, and then there's a feeling that you get when something is off. And a lot of times we cue in on something and you can go, okay, that person doesn't look like our normal customers, right? That person doesn't look like the normal, type of customer that comes to this location. That person is carrying a bag that's not like every other bag that comes in here. That person is looking around, or that person is acting different. There's small little cues that from a developmental standpoint as a human, we pick up on because our primal brain, right, it's programmed to pick up on a difference in the sequence. That's how we have survived and how we have progressed as a species. Yesterday, while I'm at work, one of the things that we do in our guard position is we have three main doors, three main entrances, exits. They're just points of egress at the store. And the guards, there's 3 armed guards. We rotate between door, and door, depending on the time frame, right? So I go to what is normally the main exit door, and as I'm standing there, right as I switch out with the other security guard, a guy walks in. And he walks in, he's, dressed a certain way that's not necessarily different than most of the people, but it's a little off. There's some demographic differences about this guy. And I just happen to get that immediate, like, spidey sense where the tingle goes off, right? And I happen to look down at his waistline as he walks by, and I look into his left pocket, and I see a Glock magazine, Glock 19, Glock 17-ish magazine that's sticking up. And I can tell by the orientation of the magazine that he has a gun placed in his pocket that's upside down. Now, I am a huge Second Amendment advocate, right? I am all for people being, personally protected, being armed, having access to firearms. But there's a difference between open carry in a holster and felony carry in a waist. And there's a huge difference between open carry in a holster, felony carry in a waist, appendix carry, inside the waistband carry, and someone having a gun in their pocket upside down in an orientation that's completely just irrational, right? So immediately, like in that split second of picking up that this person has this gun in that way, and then also noticing that this person never comes into this store. I work this store 4 days a week, 16 hours a day. I've been there for 4 years. I know anybody and everybody that comes in, and if I don't know them, I know the type of person that normally comes in there. So those two things, you're immediately like doing this mental math and going, something's off, right? So immediately I alert loss prevention to get on the camera. I alert the other security guard and tell him to stand in a certain location where he can get eyes on this person. And I flank this person from the back where I have a decent viewpoint of this person while they are in line at customer service, where I can see them, they can't see me. So now we have 3 sets of eyes and cameras on this person. What are we anticipating? We're anticipating a potential robbery. This person is now at the furthest point of the store away from security, so he thinks. He's got this firearm in this weird configuration, and he's standing in line patiently waiting to approach people at the customer service desk that have access to cash. Luckily, nothing happened. And in 9 times out of 10, things don't happen. And one of the downfalls of working in private security is that things like that, where we pick up on something, where we cue in on something, where we position ourselves to be there in the exact moment that something happens, because if we have to respond, we have to get there first, right? So now we're already in position in case something happens. In those moments, how do you quantify or validate the benefit of private security? Because nothing happened. But what I want you guys to understand is the same way that our lizard brain cues in on danger, the same way that our pre-programmed frontal cortex sees something like the Glock magazine and the orientation of the gun, the same way that we pick up on that in a moment, I want you to understand that the person that is potentially going to do the nefarious activity, they pick up on it too. That small motion of me having a conversation, dapping up the other security guard, leaning in to give him the bro hug right as this guy walks in, and then the slight pause in my conversation, the millisecond of me stopping, looking, understanding that that's a firearm, looking at the guy, and then making that first radio call for the loss prevention officer to call me on a private line. Don't think for 1 second that the person that potentially is coming in, that guy could have been coming in just to do a fucking money order. But I guarantee you that intention has a smell, and when I pick up on that smell, when you pick up on that smell, when that mom picks up on that smell, best believe that most people also have that same reaction on the other side. It is quite possible that when he got over to the customer service area, he's thinking to himself, damn, I just walked in, 2 armed security guards, they're on to me. They're on. Okay, why is that other security guard moving closer to the desk? He was all the way by the door, and now he's halfway over here. Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna break this 20. Yeah, can I get change for this 20? I'm gonna go somewhere else. You cannot validate or quantify in terms of, hey, nothing happened, so we did a great job as private security. Because what are you basing that off of? If I was to go to the manager and say, hey, this was the situation, nothing happened, they might be like, well, yeah, that could have been it. More than likely the guy just, but I don't believe that. My point to you is that when you are working in private security, this is the goal. To be paying attention enough to where every single day that you're working, every single day that you're on your post, you should be downloading and processing information. You're not just fucking standing there. I know that people think that all we do is just fucking stand. No, sir. You are registering human behavior. You are registering human interaction. You're registering how people look when they come into a bank, when they come into a grocery store, when they go into an event. You're registering the thousands of people that you have that you come in contact with on a daily basis. What you are doing as a security guard is registering human behavior. That is what you're doing. You are downloading it. You are downloading human behavior, how people normally walk into a store, how people normally talk, how people normally interact, how people normally shop, right? And as you're registering and you're downloading that into this hard drive of a brain, if you're in tune, if you're self-aware, if you're conscious enough to your job, what you will pick up on is the one small millimeter of difference that does not align. And that is how you do your job. That's when you spring into action. Even if springing into action is simply moving a little bit closer, not interacting with this person, not alerting this person, not getting into a situation with this person, not approaching the person, but being a little bit closer to this person, so that if they do A, you are able to respond with B that quick. It's picking up on the small, teeny, tiny thing that is different. You can utilize that. You should utilize that as a private security guard, but you should utilize that in every aspect of your life. That is the true definition of situational awareness. One of these things is not like the other. And that's how you survive, okay? As you go to work today, if you're working today, make sure that you're aware. Be conscious of the fact that you are registering human behavior, social dynamics, and how people interact, and utilize that to your benefit. If you're not working today, as you go out and about and you live your life, the same principle is true. All right? Situational awareness 101. I'm at work. Y'all be great.